Yes, this is the demo presentation for the Finance 311 final project. I just wanted to give you guys an example of how I would expect you to go through the opportunity evaluation. Keep in mind that I may stop you at any time as you're going through this to ask you specific questions. I'm going to present the opportunity evaluation for Lion's Den Cafe. What I would want you guys to do in this process is describe your business opportunities, state your view of whether you believe it represents a sound investment opportunity or not, and then justify your viewpoint. I will be justifying my viewpoint with capital budgeting metrics that I've calculated, the assumptions I rely on, and how the metrics support the viewpoint. So, the opportunity. I'm looking for a student-focused eating and entertainment business located immediately adjacent to, but not on, the Athens campus of Concord University, also outside the Athens city limits. Having it outside the city limits allows me to put the facility right next to campus. Otherwise, it's not the city limits adjacent to campus are not zoned for commercial. Having it immediately adjacent to campus means that students who are living on campus, or even those that are commuters that are there, can use the business easily. They can get to it easily, even just walking, and so that makes it an alternative to maybe the existing on-campus choices. It may allow us, we don't know yet, we haven't looked at it, to also serve alcohol. That is not included in the budget analysis at this point, but that's a possibility. Doing this would require us to purchase the land and building and equipment. We do not have an existing building in a spot we can use, so we would have to build that or have somebody build it before we could go in. But we're thinking about partnering with someone who will basically take care of all of the upfront building, and then we will simply buy it from them. We're seeking equity investors for the 20% additional. We would assume that all of the fixed assets purchases will be covered by at 80% debt. That's of course consistent with commercial loans and other types of things, and so we don't see any problem getting that. Securing it will allow us to get a lower cost of debt. So we're seeking equity investors for the 20% additional required funding for fixed assets, plus $20,000 in working capital to get the business up and running. From an investment perspective, we think this is a sound investment with an adequate return to the equity based on conservative estimates of cash flow. We calculated a required equity of $74,000. That $74,000 would generate almost $500,000 of net present value. That's assuming the 10.7% WACC, and we'll explain to you where we got that discount rate here in just a little bit. Or thinking of it differently, it's going to generate an internal rate of return of almost 27%. So that's quite a good return. Of course, it's even higher to equity because such a small portion of it is equity. But simply a very good return. Has a payback period of about 4.8 years. Not bad in terms of these kinds of projects, particularly considering that we're having to build the building ourselves. So, what were the key analyses or key assumptions of the analysis? We had what we think is a very conservative cash flow forecast. And we've presented that previously, but we'll highlight that again. We calculated our discount rate based on a weighted average cost of capital, assuming the debt and equity required returns to investors. And we'll talk about the assumptions that went into that cost of capital calculation. And then we assumed that a payback that is less than 5 years is an adequate payback. That's a common standard. So as long as we pay back in less than 5 years, we have a good project. So talking about the cash flows, again, we've presented this before, obviously on a monthly basis, not any real sales or income in the first few months while we're getting the place going. And of course, our month 0 doesn't start until they turn the building over to us, and we have something to work with. And since we don't have to pay them until they turn the building over to us, we're in good shape. From there, sales grow each month, sort of on a pace. We assume that that's going to happen mostly through word of mouth and promotions. Quite honestly, I think that we have a much better chance that the sales will grow faster than that, and that we've been quite conservative about that. We've assumed an average bill per customer of $10. I think that's probably low. We've assumed at the peak that we would have about 100 customers a day. Again, if you think of this as a facility that maybe is open breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I think you would find that 100 a day sounds quite low. That works out to, if we say that that's 12 hours from, say, 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening, that works out to like 8 customers an hour. I think that we probably have underestimated that by possibly as much as half. Food and labor costs at 25%. That's based on the sort of industry averages for these sorts of things. Period costs of 5% as well. If we extend that out over the full 10-year period, you'll see that we expect that our, again, under this sort of simple set of assumptions, that we will peak out at somewhere just south of $240,000 a year in sales by year 3. And I think that's quite reasonable. Again, I think we could potentially peak out at that level in year 2. Obviously, getting that sooner would be better for us. And I also think that, as we talked about, our real peak may be closer to $400,000. So we think this is very conservative. The variable costs, since they are a percent of sales, they would go up if the sales went up. The period costs, again, on a percent of sales basis, since the period costs are really marketing and utilities and so forth, they are monthly charges that aren't on a per customer basis, but that we could manage to a budget that's about 5% of our expected sales. Means that they'll go up if the sales go up as well, but it continues to maintain this wide spread for us of value. When we put that together and sort of build out what the cash flows to investors will be, obviously it's negative at the beginning in year 0 because we need the money injected in year 0. We do go positive in year 1, and again have somewhere around $90,000 basically of investment cash flows starting in year 3 and going forward. The big jump at the end is simply recognizing that if we went all the way to year 10 and then said, let's just sell this, that we would receive a terminal value for selling it, and that could be sizable. About the terminal value, cash flows generally only extend out 10 years. We extended them out to 11 years simply because we finish our depreciation and our interest expense by then, and we want to make sure that we reflected cash flows once we've cleared sort of that period. We initially estimated them at a 20% discount rate, that discount rate being not the cost of funds, but just the cost of equity. I think that our actual discount rate is about half that, and so we've probably significantly underestimated our terminal values at this point. I will make an adjustment to that, and I think the metrics that we present reflect this adjustment to the more weighted average cost of equity as opposed to, or weighted average cost of capital as opposed to total equity. So we wind up with a bit bigger terminal value. In fact, I think, let's see if I can find that. No, don't have it with me. Anyway, so if we lower this discount rate by taking into consideration cost of debt, the terminal value will go up. So, talking about, that was kind of covering cash flows. Talking about cost of capital, again, we assumed $216,000 from debt, $74,000 from equity. The debt, obviously, then there's 74% of all the money we raise. Equity's 26%. Assumed a 10% before tax cost of debt. That's actually pretty high when you consider that on commercial properties that are secured by the property these days, that you're looking at rates that are more like 6 or 7%. Again, did that on the basis that we wanted to be conservative. The 20% cost of equity, of course, we don't know for sure what you guys are going to want for cost of equity, but we've sort of plugged in 20. We think that's a very fair, if not overly fair, return for a project like this. And so certainly if we lowered that cost of equity, our cost would go down. But we'll leave it in there. We recognize this is a startup. It's not an existing business, and so we'll leave it in there. When we adjust our costs for after tax, which is what you do when you do capital budgeting analysis, and then weight them by the proportion of money that's raised from them, we wind up with a weighted average cost of capital of about 10.7%. So pretty low. You saw that before, and that's the number that we're going to, on the one hand, we're going to use that as the discount rate for our net present value calculation. And we will adjust the terminal value so that it's calculated based on a 10.7% rate as well. And we will also use that as the benchmark to compare our internal rate of return against. So if we can get at least a 10.7% rate of return, then it should be a good project. So we calculate, again, those capital budgeting metrics using this information. Oops, sorry about that. You'll see our cash flows. When we plug in the 10.7% discount rate, of course, we get this huge value. Part of that comes, you can see that it's almost doubled the value of our terminal cash flow. And that makes sense. Again, if somebody was going to buy this from us, they might finance it the same or similar type cost of capital. And so that's the fair terminal value to them. Now, we make so much on this, and quite frankly, the terminal value contributes a lot to that, that we may want to adjust that down a little bit. But keep in mind that that terminal value is based on whatever value we achieve in years 9 and 10 in terms of investment cash flows. And right now, we think we've probably underestimated those by almost half. So we would think that they might actually be somewhere closer to 170, 180,000 a year, and so certainly that makes up for that. When we calculate the internal rate of return using this information, going through again that process and sort of discounting back to figure out what discount rate would be consistent with a zero NPV, so we just barely break even at that discount rate, we come up at 26.88%. Now, that number should be compared against not your 20% equity. It should be compared against your 10.7% weighted average cost, because that's the return both to debt and equity. Since we'd only be paying about 7.5% after tax to debt, that leaves quite a bit more to be paid to equity. So pretty awesome return. We could probably back into what the implied return to equity is from that, but pretty substantial. Calculate the payback period. Takes about 4.79 years. That's great since our threshold is 5 years. Also, that does not rely at all on any of the terminal value numbers, and so we don't have to worry about that. We are somehow enhancing our payback by making this big terminal value assumption. Similarly, since we think we've underestimated our cash flows, and they might be as much as double this amount from year to year, if we simply were to double that, that would effectively cut this payback in half. So we could see a payback in a little, call it 2.5 years instead of almost 5 years. So pretty solid. All in all, we think that the capital budgeting metrics, all three of them point to a viable project, and we think a good project. And so we're recommending that we go forward with that investment. Questions?